It should have been the best party of 1929. All the Hollywood crowd came. Producers with their starlets, stars with their girlfriends and boyfriends, and every hustler along Sunset Boulevard. They danced, they drank, they smoked, and did a lot of other things behind closed doors. It should have been a great night like all the rest, but Hollywood almost collapsed at this party. Come to the Wild Party on the seamy side of the silver screen. The Wild Party stars James Coco as Fat Funny Man Jolly Grimm and Raquel Welch as Queenie. Rated R.
It's a night they're still whispering about.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that's...
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And you can consider this your invitation to The Wild Party from 1975.
The Wild Party was directed by James Ivory from a screenplay by Walter Marks, which was based in part on The Wild Party, a 1928 narrative poem by Joseph Moncure March. And it was produced by Ismail Merchant.
The Wild Party stars James Coco as Jolly Grimm, Raquel Welch as Queenie, Perry King as Dale Sword, David Dukes as James Jimmy Morrison, Tiffany Bolling as Kate, Marya Small as Bertha, Royal Dano as Tex, Annette Ferra as Nadine Jones, Eddie Lawrence as Kreutzer, Bobo Lewis as Wilma, Don de Natale as Jackie.
Also appearing are Dena Dietrich as Mrs. Murchison, Regis J. Cordic as A.J. Murchison, Jennifer Lee as Madeline True, Baruch Lumet as the tailor, Frederick Franklin as Sam the Mogul, J.S. Johnson as Morris the Mogul, Tom Reese as Eddie the Stuntman, Geraldine Barron as Grace Jones, Michael Grant Hall as Oscar Darmano, Skipper as Philip Darmano, Ralph Manza as the fruit dealer, and Martin Cove as Eddie the editor.
The Wild Party opens with some brief production credits and a snippet of our theme song. The movie proper opens with Jim Morrison, not that one, breaking the fourth wall. The Wild Party is already in progress and he's describing, poetically, random guests.
First he introduces us to is Madeline True, a cutie pie sweetheart actress.
A bisexual thespian.
And then Sam and Morris, the movie muggles. And then a character called Jackie, who he said supplied the marijuana, and later he'll bring out the cocaine, morphine, and Turkish hash. Everything that's needed for a proper bash. He's followed by Bertha, who was a dancer, who had to quit after an injury that was caused by Jackie. But she still follows him around with a limp. And she still works for him, though.
Because he's her pimp.
Eddie Mangione is a stuntman, and he's escorting Grace Jones.
Not that one. Then he introduces us to the piano players. There's two of them. It's Oscar Darmano and Philip Darmano. They're brothers, but something in his introduction intimates that perhaps they are lovers too.
They give new credence to the phrase brotherly love.
And then yakadoo wackadoo, it's party, party, party time.
And James takes the opportunity to introduce us to our hosts, Queenie and Jolly Grimm.
Queenie is the mistress of Jolly. He's the funny man of the movies.
Then we're presented with a new title card telling us that this is Hollywood 1929 and the time is the morning of the party.
Hope that flashback didn't give you whiplash, Jeff. Queenie is sleeping in late. She had a rough night, obviously. Wilma, the maid, brings in her breakfast and opens the curtains, waking Queenie with a greeting of morning. Queenie's hair and makeup is near perfect despite her previous evening's carousing and the sleep that came afterwards.
Queenie rolls over away from the sunlight. She tosses in bed for a bit, and she can hear Jolly Grimm being fitted for a suit in another room.
Well, he's very loud. Jolly's negotiating with his tailors for a jacket that actually fits him. They refuse to make it big enough. He tells them that he's premiering his new film, Brother Jasper, tonight at the Wild Party, and he plans to raise his hands in the air and say, roll the film. He demonstrates how this move will go, and he rips the back out of his coat.
Okay, I think it's important for us to say that the reason for this party is to premiere this film. Jolly Grimm is kind of a has-been actor. He's been working on this film that he independently produced himself, and he's been working on it for the past few years. So he's hoping to find a buyer for it at this party.
Yes, he's got studio moguls coming. And it's also important to note that in 1929, silent films, which Jolly was known for, are being phased out, and the talkies are coming. So he has to bridge that gap somehow, if he can. And speaking of silent movies, now we see a little snippet of Brother Jasper.
And from there, we are treated to scenes from several of Grimm's other comedies as the opening credits roll.
And the one credit that I noticed was that the music and lyrics are by Walter Marks, the screenwriter. Now we're back to party planning. Jolly is drinking as Wilma tries to vacuum, but Jolly tells her to turn that noise off. Queenie busts into the room to announce that Goldstone can't come. He's going to a party at Pickfair, the home of A-listers Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. Jolly asks if they were invited to that party, and Queenie, obviously lying, says yes, but she threw the invitation away. It was the same night as their party, after all, and they couldn't have gone.
Just then the phone rings, and it's Queenie's friend Kate on the other end. She says she will be coming to the party tonight, and she will be bringing her new beau, actor Dale Sword. Dale just finished his first picture and is an up-and-coming star.
Queenie begs Kate to arrive in time for the screening. She's trying to keep it jolly for Jolly, who's excited about tonight. Now we're with Tex, who's Jolly's driver/bodyguard. He's getting dressed to go out, and before he puts his jacket on, he straps on a gun. Wilma comes in with a list of the alcohol needed for tonight, and Tex can't believe how much gin they're getting. He asks about Jolly, and Wilma says he's as nervous as a cat, and that he wants to go to Pasadena now. She warns him to look out for hijackers as she fixes his collar, and then they leave.
Now Grimm is showing Brother Jasper to James, our former narrator, while editor Eddie handles the equipment.
It was wild to see Martin Kove looking so young, in a very small part in this movie.
Eddie is setting up the second reel of the film. It's not being projected. It's on a
view screen. One of those Nickelodeon.
It's not like a Nickelodeon thing. It's not a flatbed, but
yeah, I don't know the technical term.
But it's a viewer. James had written out some of the title cards as a favor, but Jolly had given him co-writing credit for that. James says they agreed that he wouldn't receive credit, but Jolly felt that produced, directed, starring, and written by Jolly Grimm was a bit much, and besides, he likes to help out the little guy.
Then Jolly shows Jim the full cannibal scene in Brother Jasper as the song Funny Man plays out. He wants Jim to see his new dialogue card. The scene is of a monk being captured by some natives in Africa. They're white men in blackface. It's pretty racist and, I guess, typical of the 1920s, we're supposed to think. But they capture him, and they're trying to force him into a giant pot of boiling water. And the title card that Jolly's so proud of says, "You can't boil me, I'm a friar."
At that, James turns off the film. Jolly asks why he stopped, and James is going to give him his honest opinion. The cannibal scene, while funny, doesn't really fit in with the tone of the rest of the film and should be cut. But Jolly isn't one to graciously accept this criticism.
Mm-mm.
James turns back to watch the rest of the flick, but Jolly tells him not to bother. He sends James off, and James leaves, telling Jolly that he'll see him at the party tonight.
As Martin Kove stands by awkwardly. Now we're on the road with Tex and Jolly. Tex is driving what appears to be a period-appropriate car on unincorporated land somewhere on the coast. Tex is trying to soothe Jolly's ego. Jolly says Queenie's real mad at me. We don't see why, but if you watch the full cut of the movie instead of the AIP cut that we watched, you would know it's because he slapped her in the face. Jolly says Queenie doesn't need him anymore. She's got enough star power to work without him. So he's going to ask her to marry him as soon as he gets Brother Jasper off the ground and everything's settled.
We go back to the house to watch Queenie do a dance number in front of her mirror to the song That Queenie of Mine. And then we're back with Jolly. He asks Tex if he thinks Queenie will have him, and Tex assures him that she's crazy about him.
Now we see Tex and Jolly buying fruit from a starstruck roadside fruit vendor. The vendor introduces his daughter Rosa to Jolly and asks why he no making the pictures anymore. Jolly says he has a new one coming out tonight. And then the vendor makes his daughter Rosa kiss Jolly for luck, against Jolly's wishes and probably hers. But he does eye her and calls her beautiful. The vendor tries to give Jolly some fruit for free, well, a cantaloupe, but Tex manages to force the money into his hand anyways. And then they leave.
And then we're back at the house, and we see Jolly being fitted again for his suit. Queenie calls out from the other room that Kreutzer can't come to the party. Jolly goes over to take the phone and learns that Kreutzer plans on going to Pick Fair tonight instead. But Jolly really wants him to come. Kreutzer is a studio head, and Jolly really needs him to see Brother Jasper. So, Jolly promises him 2 redheads will be at his beck and call if he comes tonight, which is enough to convince Kreutzer he'll be there.
Jolly says that those redheads will play Mozart on Kreutzer's stomach if he wants. Jolly hangs up and talks to Queenie. He's complimenting her and staring moonily at her as she primps for the party.
Queenie asks who these redheads in question are, and Grimm says he'll figure it out later. Wilma is a redhead, so he can fall back on her if need be.
I wonder if Wilma knows about that plan. Tex, the aforementioned Wilma, and Jimmy come in. The guests are arriving. But first they're going to share a toast. It's a toast to Jolly, but he merely clinks instead of drinks. He's not drinking alcohol right now. And then we cut down to the party, which is pretty hopping.
It's actually the exact same footage we saw when James introduced us to the partygoers at the beginning of the movie.
So we've looped back.
So it's the same footage without the narration.
And then we take over from the point where Jolly and Queenie swan out into the balcony, overlooking all the assembled guests. There's a bit of applause, and then we see Jimmy looking at Queenie, presumably love-struck. Queenie and Jolly begin to mingle with the guests, and Jolly glad hands the studio people.
They greet Sam and Morris, the moguls, and briefly discuss Brother Jasper. Then they go off to greet the Murchisons who have just arrived. Mrs. Murchison calls Queenie Mrs. Grimm, which makes Queenie look a little uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. She also says that she loves the house. It's so Hispanic.
And she wants it on the tour one day.
The Murchisons announce that they plan on going to Pickford's party that evening, so Mr. Murchison asks how long this picture is that Jolly wants them to see.
Jolly tells him it's 82 minutes long, and from the looks on Mr. Murchison's face, that's too long.
So Jolly adds, maybe less?
Jolly tells Tex to get everyone into the projection room. They're getting started now. Tex and Queenie both object. Tex mentions that Kreutzer's not there yet, and Queenie wants to wait for Kate and Dale, but Jolly isn't waiting. He goes back to the Murchisons and tries to explain the inspiration behind the character of Brother Jasper, but Mr. Murchison just looks confused.
But now Jolly claps his hands and shouts movie time and starts ushering people into the screening room. But just then, Kate arrives and announces herself and relays Pash, Mr. Dale's sword, the sharpest blade in the Hollywood Hills.
Heels.
Queenie goes over to hug her friend, and Kate introduces her to Dale. Queenie's and Dale's eyes meet, and there is a connection between them that can only mean trouble. Jolly comes to gather Queenie to take her into the screening room, and she takes the moment to introduce him to Dale. He gives a quick how do you do before escorting Queenie to the screening room.
Dale and the Murchisons hang back for a chat. The Murchisons tell Dale that his picture has done very well in New Orleans, and Dale's delighted to hear that news. But then everyone makes their way into Jolly's home theater. It's a screen in a big room with chairs set up for the audience. There's an unseen orchestra playing, and Jolly stands before the crowd to introduce the film that he's so proud of. He thanks his crew, Nick, Jimmy, Eddie, and the rest, and says that they made it through this production. Sounds like it might have been a little tough. And then he tells the audience that he's presenting the film to them, to love, he hopes, and better yet, to fight over. He points at the Murchisons there, who look a bit uncomfortable at that. But Jolly says he couldn't give Brother Jasper to nicer people. And then there's applause.
Jolly tells the projectionist to roll the film, and then he goes to the back to nervously pace around and smoke. He stands back to watch the crowd's reaction, and there is scattered laughter as Brother Jasper rings a bell, flying up and down with the rope as it rises and falls.
Showing off his underpants. Dale turns away from the film to stare at Queenie, and Kate notices this, as does Queenie, who looks a little bit alarmed.
And Jolly is noticing that the Murchisons' reactions aren't exactly what he was hoping for. Most of the partygoers seem to quickly lose interest in the film and start whispering amongst themselves.
Mr. Murchison looks outright bored.
Kate, however, is looking at the screen with a big smile on her face.
So is Mrs. Murchison.
Dale keeps stealing glances at Queenie, and she at him.
Finally, Jolly is fed up, and he leaves to go out to the courtyard. He calls a waiter, asking for a drink. And then a teenage waif comes up to Jolly. She's carrying a suitcase, and she asks if this is Mr. Grimm's house. Jolly says yes, and then she asks, do you know where Mr. Grimm is? And he says, I'm right here.
She tells him that she hadn't recognized him and that he looks so much smaller in person. On the screen, he looks so enormous. He interrupts her and asks who she is.
She says Grace Jones is her sister, and her name is Nadine, and she hitchhiked all the way from Burbank to get there. She says that she's a dancer, a good one, and she wants to dance for all the Hollywood people tonight. And Jolly says this isn't a good time, much to Nadine's disappointment. But Jolly tells her that she should go inside and ask Wilma for some food. There's sarsaparilla in the icebox. Nadine thanks Jolly and says maybe later, and he says we'll see, and he shows her inside. In the theater, the cannibal scene isn't changing anyone's mind, certainly not Murchison's.
Once back inside, Jolly sees that Kreutzer has finally arrived. Jolly takes him to the screening room to see the last reel of Brother Jasper. Kreutzer looks more disgusted than amused by the film. Besides, he only came for the redheads.
The film ends, the little girl walks, but only to light applause.
As the guests pour out of the screening room, the Murchisons stop Jolly to say goodbye before they head to Pickfair. Mrs. Murchison says she enjoyed the film, but suggests that Jolly change the little girl to a little boy, like in that old film, The Kid. Mr. Murchison says that he's sure that the film turned out just the way that Grimm wanted it. And Jolly, trying to save a potential deal, says that's not entirely true, that there's still editing to be done. But the Murchisons are leaving now, and AJ doesn't have time to discuss this right now. The Murchisons catch up to Kate and Dale Sword, and AJ says that they can call for their car and they can all ride over to Pickfair together. But Dale says if it's all the same to them that he'd rather stay at this party for a while. Queenie tries to hide how this makes her feel.
Jolly runs up the stairs. He's still trying to convince A.G. Murchison to pick up the picture. He tells him that Kreutzer wants the film, but Mammoth Studio doesn't have A.J.'s setup. A.J. encourages Jolly to sell to Kreutzer if he really wants the movie. Mrs. Murchison reminds Jolly that she wants his house on her tour. Jolly offers to call A.J. on Monday, but A.J. obviously doesn't want that. He says call later in the week. And then they finally get away from him.
As the Murchisons drive off, Queenie tries to cheer Jolly up. She tells Jolly that the screening went well, and people seem to like the picture. But Jolly is upset that the Murchisons left without speaking to him about it, and Queenie reminds him that Kreutzer is still there, and she thinks it's a swell picture. But Jolly doesn't care what Queenie thinks.
He says, who gives a flying fog what you think? He tells Queenie he's not interested in her thoughts, she's just supposed to look good. Keep your trap shut, he says bitterly. Looks like he's really paving the way for a successful proposal. Queenie turns around and goes inside.
And inside, the party continues. There's a sing-along going on by the piano.
Madeline meets Bertha, and she seems pretty smitten by her. Jackie the Pimp suggests to Queenie that she regale the crowd with a performance. Queenie tries to beg off, but Phil the piano player suggests Singapore Sally. He and Oski know that one.
And so she obliges. Jolly goes over to Kreutzer and corners him, telling him that, for the right deal, he thinks he can get the rights away from Murchison. Kreutzer thinks that Brother Jasper is behind the times. Silence are passé, and sound is the new big thing. Jolly assures him they can add sound with dubbing, but Kreutzer is done talking shop. He wants to know where the redheads are that he was promised. So Jolly goes off to find a couple of redheads.
Queenie's still performing Singapore Sally. It's not over yet. Now she's doing a little soft shoe with a cane.
Meanwhile, Nadine has found her sister Grace and asks if she can show Jolly her moves now. But Grace says that Jolly looks a little busy right now. Jolly is whispering in the ear of a red-headed woman and escorting her over to where Kreutzer is waiting.
Downstairs, Queenie finally wraps up Singapore Sally, to much applause. Dale helps Queenie off the stage and praises her effusively. He asks for a private dance.
He says he's no Herman Castle, but might he have the next dance?
She accepts and asks Kate if that's okay, and Kate has no choice but to agree. Queenie says they should dance in the garden where it's more quiet. As they walk away, Kate looks very regretful.
James stops Queenie to warn her that she's asking for trouble. Queenie assures him that she's fine, and Dale tells James that he's next on her dance card and he'll have to wait his turn. Jamie says he just wanted to talk to her, and Dale mocks him by threatening to duel him with imaginary swords. En garde, monsieur, he says, and James just swats him away.
Now Jolly is looking for Queenie. Tex tells Jolly about the Singapore Sally performance in the bar. Then we cut to Dale and Queenie dancing very romantically.
And back inside, Kreutzer, now with his redheads, is having to endure a jolly grim pitch. Kreutzer says audiences don't want to see monks. They want to see gangsters. So Jolly jumps on this and proposes that they add a scene where they put Jasper in a bank. He acts out the entire scene using a pipe as a substitute for a gun. Tex helps out, and when Jolly threatens his character with his gun, Tex refuses to stand down. Because I happen to know you're on a tobacco.
Now who's the funny man? Everyone laughs. Jolly wants to know what Kreutzer thinks, but Kreutzer puts him off. They'll talk later. He's got redheads to take care of.
Back out in the garden, Dale and Queenie are drinking champagne. He proposes a toast to her and goes in for a kiss. Please don't, she says.
Now it's time for the first of our 3 odd Chinese lantern transitions, where we see a set of Chinese lanterns, it defocuses, and then we fade up to another scene. It's odd. We fade up to the ballroom where everyone is dancing the Herbert Hoover Drag. That's the actual name of the song. Dale is still dancing with Queenie inside, and Kate is looking pretty devastated. But it's a pretty jazzy number, so they aren't slow dancing at least.
We see Nadine dancing with her sister Grace. And then Jackie goes in for a solo spot.
This is a choreographed number, like a line dance. And the music gets faster and faster until everyone collapses on the floor.
Then we see Bertha trying to drum up business at the bar, but she's not having much luck. There's a couple of guys doing a sort of ventriloquist act that keep mocking her.
It's extremely annoying.
It's a man sitting on another man's lap and pretending to be a dummy. We don't know his actual intelligence.
He's saying rude things to people under the guise of being a ventriloquist dummy. But fortunately for Bertha, Madeline comes up to rescue her from this lame bit. Bertha effusively praises Madeline's screen kiss with some actor, but it's clear that Madeline only has eyes for Bertha. And eventually she leads her away from the 2 dummies.
Meanwhile, Queenie and Dale have taken a seat in the hall. Kate joins them and tells Dale that it's time to go. Aren't you having fun, he asks, and she replies, no. Besides, they still have to go to Pickford's party. Dale asks Queenie to come with them, but Queenie reminds her that she's the hostess of this party and kind of has an obligation to stay. So Dale decides he's not going either. He asks Kate if she would mind going on alone. She starts to say she doesn't want to go alone and ends up spilling Dale's drink all over him. He jumps up and Queenie starts wiping him down when Jolly appears, telling her, I'm warning you, lay off that guy. And Queenie asks why.
They start bickering and Dale inserts himself between the 2. He says to Jolly, haven't you had too much to drink, old sport? And then all of them start tussling on the stairs. Tex and Jimmy hold Jolly back as he insults Dale for only having 1 picture to his 27. He calls him a cheap Valentino knockoff. Dale pulls Queenie, but not Kate, away from the strife.
James and Tex drag Jolly back into the ballroom.
Jolly hurdles himself down a short flight of stairs, falling on his back. With the help of Jimmy and Tex, he gets up again and stands on the landing, which serves as a balcony overlooking his guests. And now it's time for his Oscar bait speech.
He stands up and says, who do you think got me where I am? My mother? My father? They dumped me when I was 6 years old. The nuns? They taught me to feel guilty just about being alive. And who do you think taught me to act? My teachers? Never had one. Directors? I directed them. So who built my career? Agents? Bloodsuckers for 10%. Studios? A bunch of horses' asses with nothing but dollar signs in their penny brains. So who made Jolly Grimm? I'll tell you who. Little old big old me, that's who. Me, and I'll do it again. Not because of any help from you, you freeloaders, but in spite of you. I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back shining and big and bright and hot. Hotter than ever. And I don't need help from anybody. Not even you, Queenie.
Here he breaks, almost sobbing. But just then, Nadine, dressed as some kind of forest sprite, finds him and leads him down the stairs to a conveniently placed throne. It's just a big chair facing the ballroom floor, and she begins to dance for him. Weirdly.
Jolly gets tears in his eyes. This is reminding him of Queenie when he first found her. While this is going on, Queenie is telling the tale to Dale of how she and Jolly got together.
This made us question when we were watching this. Is Jolly looking at Nadine, thinking that Nadine might be the next Queenie? Or is he totally not focusing on Nadine and thinking of when he and Queenie were first an item? I'm not sure. Are you?
I tend to think it's the latter, but I think you think it's the former.
Yeah, that's just because I know what happens later in the film. I'm thinking that might be the case. But it's really hard to tell from Jolly's expression because he's completely blank. He's totally elsewhere, whatever he's looking at. It's not really Nadine. So you might be right.
Regardless, Nadine finishes her dance, and Jolly does appear to be moved. Likewise, Queenie finishes her storytelling.
I said therapy session with Dale.
And she wonders what it has all led to, and Dale suggests that maybe it's led to him.
Queenie doesn't look that convinced, though. Then there's another Chinese lantern transition to an orgy. It's sex, drugs, and ragtime. There's threesomes, a devil's triangle, bare breasts, a lesbian seduction. That's Madeline and Bertha. And piles of half-naked people writhing on the floor. I guess this party just got wild.
Jackie is snorting coke and spreading that around. Grace is hooked up with a guy. A Pile of Bodies, Two Guys and a Girl, Charlie and Phil. And the song Ain't Nothing Bad About Feeling Good.
That's the ragtime I mentioned. Elsewhere, Jolly is roaming the hallways, opening doors on various sexual tableaus looking for Queenie. Nadine is trailing after him. And then we go back to the orgy for more scenes of debauchery. We do cut in on Madeline and Bertha, and actually they seem really happy. It's probably the best sex that Bertha's ever had, and she kind of deserves it after what she's been through.
Jolly checks behind another door, and Nadine, trying to be helpful, checks another. And Nadine pauses. She's found her sister with a man who's not Eddie, the stuntman that she arrived with. Nadine looks distraught. Jolly tells her not to cry, and he takes her down to the kitchen for some of Wilma's angel food cake.
That should help. Kate is in another room talking to Jimmy, trying to justify her cheating beau.
Kate says that you got to be philosophical about these things. I understand why my best friend would run off with Dale. I mean, everyone knows what kind of a life she has with Jolly. It's no secret. Jimmy wants to find them because he doesn't like the idea of Kate and Dale together. And Kate says that she understands that he's been stuck on Queenie for years, plain as day. But hey, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, like tonight. Okay, we both lost, but that doesn't mean a couple of losers aren't entitled to a little fun, right?
She kisses him, but he's unresponsive, and she says, "Okay, loser, you win." And then we cut to cutting the cake. Jolly flops a piece of angel food cake on a plate for Nadine. Apropos for an angel face, he says. He waxes nostalgic about meeting Queenie, though, who was also once a starving, hitchhiking wannabe star like Nadine.
Nadine asks if Jolly had ever put Queenie in one of his pictures, and Jolly says no, what he did was take care of her. Nadine says that Grace told her to be nice to him, and maybe he'll put her in one of his pictures. Then she tells him that Jolly can kiss her and stuff if he wants to. He puts his hand on her cheek and pushes in, just as Eddie and Grace come into the kitchen.
And then all heck breaks loose. Eddie attacks Jolly, and Wilma, who follow behind Grace and Eddie, tries to stop Eddie. Then other people come in too. Eddie starts hurling insults and challenging everyone to a fight. Now Dale arrives with Queenie. Dale takes out Eddie as Queenie comforts Jolly on the floor. Once Eddie is knocked out, Grace starts attacking Dale, till some guy pulls her off of him, and Queenie leaves Jolly's side to go check on Dale's injuries. And then Jimmy takes over, caring for Jolly. Once on his feet, Jolly tells Queenie to go get her rocks off with Dale if that's what she wants. She starts to leave, but Jolly grabs Dale. "I'll get you, you son of a bitch," he warns. And then Dale and Queenie leave, as Jimmy holds Jolly back.
So, having been given the invitation, Queenie and Dale go off to find a room where they can be alone.
Everyone needs therapy more than sex at this party. Now we have our third Chinese lantern transition. And we're back in the ballroom, where Kate is at the piano singing a torch song as Philip plays.
The Sunday Morning Blues.
So obviously we've crossed over the midnight barrier a while ago, and the party looks kind of dead.
While the song is going on, Jolly is sitting at Queenie's vanity, smelling her perfume. He goes back downstairs and walks to the ballroom, stepping around the half-naked bodies strewn about the room. "Happy Sunday morning to you," Kate tells Jolly.
Instead of consoling him, she's trying to rile him up. She tells Jolly that he's old and Queenie is young. She probably fooled around before. Dale is number 679 on her list of lovers, and Queenie will fool around again, because women have needs too, despite what men think. Last week the milkman, this week Dale, next week the bootlegger. Jolly keeps yelling, "Shut up," at her. And finally she does.
She says that she was just kidding and trying to make light of everything. And then Sam and Morris, the movie moguls, come by. Jolly reminds them they still have business to discuss about Brother Jasper. But they're headed over to Pick Fair. They see Kate and ask if she didn't come with Dale's sword. She should go get him, and the four of them can ride over together. Kate says Dale is busy, and besides, it's too late. But Sam and Morris say it's not too late. They serve breakfast at the Pick Fair. Jolly tries to talk shop some more, but they're more intent on finding Dale. They begin singing out, "Where's Dale's sword?" They decide he must be holed up somewhere upstairs and start yelling at Dale to come down. Jolly joins in, yelling out that Dale should come down so he can see a real actor at work.
Texas join them, just as Jolly starts telling the moguls about a new scene for Brother Jasper. It's going to be a new high point. The moguls aren't interested, so Jolly starts calling out to Dale too. And upstairs, Dale finally hears the ruckus coming from below. He jumps out of bed, naked, and starts to get dressed.
Back downstairs, Jolly is still describing the scene to Sam and Morris, the moguls. Not having a pipe handy, he grabs Tex's gun to start waving that around. Jimmy appears in the stairs and asks Jolly to give him the gun, but he backs up the stairs when Jolly points the gun at him.
Dale and Queenie appear on the balcony. Queenie is shrieking at Jolly to put down the gun, and Jolly instead starts firing. He shoots Jimmy in the neck.
Dale leaps over the staircase and takes a bullet point blank.
Even though Tex is trying to wrestle the gun away, Jolly's still shooting, and he hits Queenie up on the balcony, and she goes down. The rampage ends after Jolly sees that he shot Queenie. Concerned, he climbs over Dale's dead body to go to her. Kate walks in and sees her cheating boyfriend dead on the stairs and goes into hysterics. She's held back by the moguls. Jimmy looks like he can't believe that there's a hole in his neck.
Nadine comes in and, gingerly stepping over Dale's body, goes up the stairs to where Jolly is holding Queenie's body.
But she sees it's a little early to take Queenie's place just yet.
And now we're in the hospital. Jimmy is a patient with a bandage around his neck. He's been writing something. He folds up the paper and on the outside writes, "The Wild Party."
And then we roll credits while a happy tune plays. And that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we are talking about The Wild Party from 1975.
As we briefly got into when we were going over the plot of the film, there are actually two distinct cuts for this movie. The longer director's cut is the one that's widely available today, but the one that we reviewed and went over was the AIP theatrical cut from 1975.
Which was kind of hard to find, wasn't it?
We found it on an old VHS from Embassy.
So it wasn't a great looking print that we watched, but we did see what appeared in theaters in 1975. The script was based on Joseph Moncure March's 1926 narrative poem, which was about a party given by a vaudeville comic in his walk-up apartment in Greenwich Village. Walter Marks, a composer and lyricist, considered the poem to be a great basis for a musical film, and he decided to write the film adaptation. His script relocated the action to Hollywood at the end of the silent movie era. Marks took his project to Edgar Lansbury and Joseph Baruch, producers of Broadway musicals such as Godspell, and they agreed to executive produce. Lansbury thought the poem was so wildly unconventional that it was only worth making with a budget of $200,000 as an experiment in which the risks were minimized.
Walter Marks's brother Peter introduced Walter to director James Ivory and producer Ismail Merchant, who had just made the movie Savages. Lansbury and Baruch hired Merchant and Ivory, and at that point the film became a drama, not a musical.
James Coco was cast in the lead. He's quoted as saying, "There isn't anything I don't get to do, and that's terribly appealing to any actor. It's full, fleshed out, and part of it is silent. I get to do love scenes with Raquel. I don't get that opportunity too often. I usually get the mule. She isn't what I expected. She's small. She's very serious. An organic actor, and I love that. We have a marvelous relationship." End quote.
Raquel Welch was cast as Queenie, and the team secured financing from AIP. The budget for The Wild Party was $900,000. Arkoff is quoted as saying AIP usually made movies for the Woolworths line, but admitted with this film the company was going to add a line and that it was a wildly artistic film.
Filming started on April 29, 1974 at the Riverside Mission Inn in Riverside, California. Shooting took 5 weeks. Merchant read an article in Life magazine stating that the 1875 hotel was about to undergo a $2 million renovation, and he decided to shoot the whole film on the premises before that could happen. Ivory said the inn was chosen because it's typical of the palatial, beautifully Rococo architecture of the period. The inn, built in 1876, has hosted 10 presidential visits, as well as notable guests like Susan B. Anthony, Albert Einstein, William Randolph Hearst, Joseph Pulitzer, and Helen Keller.
Though James Coco liked working with Raquel Welch, he was basically the only one on the set who felt that way. Ivory is quoted as saying, "Raquel Welch was a very, very difficult actress to work with. She fired the cameraman. She fired Ismail. She would have fired Perry King, and it was our film. I did not enjoy making The Wild Party."
Welch demanded that the cinematographer Walter Lassley be fired after he made an impertinent remark to her. She also wanted Ivory fired and replaced as director by her then-boyfriend Ron Talsky, who was the costume designer for the film. The Directors Guild had to get involved, and there were threatening letters sent to Welch, and eventually everything settled down and filming resumed.
Ivory later said working with a large crowd of extras in May and June heat reminded him of shooting those tempestuous movie stars in Bombay.
Choreographer Patricia Birch was at the time one of the leading dance directors in the United States. She had 4 shows playing simultaneously on Broadway during the period that this movie was in production. In addition to Welch's Singapore Sally number, Birch staged 8 other dances in which more than 100 people participated, and this included that solo dance from Don De Natale, who played Jackie. De Natale was a former U.S. ballroom dance champion.
Although the film could be seen as drawing from the rape and murder scandal that dogged comedian Fatty Arbuckle until he was found not guilty of all charges, Arbuckle's story was not an inspiration for the story of the Wild Party. However, James Coco said in an interview that he researched Arbuckle's life as he prepared for this role.
Now, the reason there was a second cut of the film is because AIP test screened Ivory's cut in Santa Barbara and San Diego early in 1975, and both of those audiences hated the film, but for different reasons. The UC Santa Barbara students liked the orgy and the fight scenes, but the middle-class audiences in San Diego hated those scenes. However, they loved Perry King's character and seeing Welch do a serious part. AIP didn't know how to handle the contradictory test results, and so they took the original cut and re-edited it.
Ivory said they did more than recut it. They turned it upside down and they distributed 2 versions. I never knew which is being shown. There was talk within the company of showing one version in cities and the other in small towns, but it's not known if that's how the distribution actually worked.
I think other countries got the director's cut too instead of the AIP cut. Ivory said that the main changes AIP affected were softening Coco's character. They did remove a scene in which Jolly slapped Queenie, and they added discarded sex scenes and introduced flashbacks and flash forwards. Ivory wrote that, quote, patched together remnants of the film proves once more that you cannot effectively re-edit a picture and change its character in order to save it. Lansbury, Baruch, and Marks approved the edited version, but Raquel Welch is said to have hated it.
AIP's press book encourages theater owners to work with local TV and radio stations to have a Raquel Welch lookalike contest, and said they could have the lookalike comparison extend to as much of Miss Welch as you deem wise, whatever that means. They also suggested a James Coco lookalike contest.
For as much of him as they deemed wise. And their last suggestion was a 20s music dance party in conjunction with local media, because everyone knows how big 20s music was in the 70s.
Taglines for the Wild Party include Hollywood in the 20s, gin, sin, and a night they're still whispering about.
Raquel Welch sizzles in this scandal about one of the most famous comedians of the fabulous Roaring 20s.
Talk about wild.
Talk about parties. Variety published a fairly positive review, calling the film overly talky but a magnificent showpiece for Coco's talents. He successfully covers a spectrum from silly comedy, warm humor, sober anger, maddening frustration, and drunken psychosis. Holding her own as his mistress is Raquel Welch, registering very strongly.
Charles Champlin of the Los Angeles Times stated, it is impossible to know exactly what merchant Ivory and scriptwriter Walter Marks had in mind for the Wild Party. It is too simple-minded to be taken seriously, but too earnest to work as a piece of campy nostalgia.
Jonathan Rosenbaum of the Monthly Film Bulletin stated that it is difficult to imagine how even the longer versions of the film could overcome the formidable handicap of a miscast James Coco, an actor well suited to the broad overkill of recent premature, but quite inadequate for the emotional range and shading of a tragicomic silent star. Rosenbaum did go on to state, though, that the songs and musical numbers are particularly delightful.
Other reviewers were more blatant in their dislike. Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune gave the film 1 star out of 4 and noted in a brief review that collectors of trash movies might want to catch it while it played town. Gary Arnold of the Washington Post wrote that the film can be recommended with a fairly clear conscience to connoisseurs of bad movies, but anyone looking for a serious night's entertainment will have only himself to blame.
The Wild Party was a financial flop. Ivory thought the film's main problem, apart from the re-editing, was that audiences could not identify with any of the characters. He said, quote, I think its mixed style, part musical, part melodrama, part character piece, would have gone down better if the audience could have entered more into those characters' lives. Isn't that a him problem?
After its 1975 release, other versions of The Wild Party varying in length resurfaced on VHS and DVD, as well as a director's cut 20 minutes longer, briefly released to French cinemas in 1976 and U.S. cinemas in 1981.
The Wild Party didn't premiere in New York City at all until 1981, as part of an 8-week Merchant and Ivory retrospective. That showing was of the original cut of the film, not AIP's chop job. Vincent Canby of the New York Times wrote in his review of the film, it would be difficult to imagine a more unlikely backer for the Wild Party than AIP, the company that made its fortunes on the Beach Party pictures, Roger Corman's Edgar Allan Poe horror films, and such oddball exploitation items as I Was a Teenage Frankenstein.
However, Canby could not bring himself to recommend even the director's cut of the film. He's quoted as saying, the script is, I think, really terrible. Never do Mr. Ivory, Mr. Coco, Miss Welch, and the others discover the proper way to play it, probably because it's unplayable. Mr. Coco and Miss Welch aren't bad, but there's no material for them to act or even to recite. It's not a question of our not understanding the characters. We've seen them before and understand them all too well.
The Wild Party was rated R in the United States, but it was banned in the United Kingdom until 1982, when the British Film Council gave it an 18 rating.
The original narrative poem, The Wild Party, became the inspiration for an off-Broadway musical in 1999. The book, lyrics, and music were by Andrew Lippa. In 2000, a musical by the same name from the same source material was staged on Broadway, with a book by Michael John LaChiusa and George C. Wolfe, and music and lyrics by LaChiusa.
All right, Jeff. A lot of people had a lot of opinions about this movie, but it's time for us to give ours. What did you think of The Wild Party?
Well, we watched both cuts in preparation for this episode. The first one we watched was the longer director's cut, but the one that we went over when we did the plot synopsis was the shorter version. And I have to say that the longer cut is superior.
I agree.
There's a lot of backstory missing from the shorter cut.
And it's framed so oddly. The shorter cut begins with the party already in progress, with that fourth wall breaking scene where Jimmy is introducing characters that aren't the main focus of the movie for some reason. Whereas in the original cut, we see him in the hospital where he's starting to recite the poem, The Wild Party, and introducing the subject sort of organically. It leads us to wonder, well, why is he in the hospital? What happened at this wild party? And that's missing from the AIP cut.
Right. I understand why when AIP recut this, they chose that as the beginning, because in the longer version, that comes in the middle when he suddenly breaks the fourth wall and he's introducing these characters. And it doesn't matter that he's introducing secondary characters in the middle of the film. Let's open the film that way. It makes you think these people are more important than they actually are.
Right. They're not even secondary characters, they're tertiary characters.
But what's interesting is that in the longer cut, when he suddenly breaks the fourth wall, it's just kind of jarring because there's been nothing to establish this before that. He's not talking to us in the beginning in the hospital. We're hearing his thoughts as the narrator.
It was a very strange choice to do that, and not one I agree with. I did think that the longer version, it was over 20 minutes longer, did drag a bit. This party seemed to last forever.
But I think that a lot of the stuff was missing was actually important to the story. When Kate is talking to James about his feelings for Queenie toward the end of the film, in the shorter version, there's nothing to establish this. All the scenes of dialogue between Queenie and James were cut, except for when he stopped her before she goes out to the garden with Dale, and that just kind of comes out of nowhere.
Right. We see him looking. We don't even know if he's looking at her. He's staring up at Jolly and Queenie at sort of the beginning of the movie, and he does have a love-struck expression on his face, but we never see that he's connecting with her or trying to connect with her.
There's no context for that. And in the scene that I mentioned, when he stops her, you might interpret that as him being more defensive of Jolly's feelings, because we've established that relationship with Jolly when he was watching that edit of the film earlier.
Right. He seems to be Jolly's right-hand man and doesn't have any kind of relationship with Queenie at all, as far as we know.
And another scene that was cut between James and Queenie is when she's talking to him and he notices the bruise on her face from when Jolly hit her, and all that is missing from this film.
Right. It gives him a reason to not want to see her with Jolly, but also not want to see her with anyone else. And we don't get that at all. And
missing all that, when he stops her, it just seems out of place.
They also change things so things happen out of order. In the beginning, we see everyone's getting ready. Everyone's primping and dressing, first for the day and then later for the party. But they just kind of cut that in and out of the movie now.
Yeah, it's so weird because in the long cut, Jolly's getting fitted for his suit. Queenie does her dance to her theme song. And then Jolly's still getting fitted for his suit. But in the short version, he goes out and it goes back to be fitted for his suit again.
Right. And it's the same scene. And she gets dressed twice. First, she gets dressed to talk to Jolly, and then she gets dressed for the party. It's very strange. I don't think AIP was super careful about how they put this together. We don't know who re-edited it, but it seems like maybe by committee, without a lot of thought to the artistic merits of what was filmed.
I didn't A-B compare this, but also the orgy scene seemed to be a lot longer in the longer cut.
Well, we did just say that they added more sex scenes that had initially been deleted from the director's cut even. So they found that footage and reinserted it. And even though they're shortening the film, they reused the clip of the party that we saw at the beginning of the movie we came back and saw it again, but without the fourth wall break that time.
Yeah, I think that fourth wall break might be the only thing that was not improvement in the longer version.
They could have had that as a voiceover where he's introducing the characters, and then we would know who's who as they arrived.
Yeah, I think that would have been a lot more effective had they gone that route.
Finding out who's who before the movie even starts gives us a chance to forget that Grace is Grace and Madeline is Madeline, and they have different roles in this film because they kind of look alike. And when they come back, we kind of had to ask ourselves, which one's that again?
I will give it the compliment that the period costumes are really good in this. The men are just wearing suits and tuxedos because men's fashion hasn't changed much in the last 150 years or so.
Ralph Lauren did all the costuming for the men, but they obviously put a lot of effort into the women's clothes. And it was Raquel's boyfriend, so she looked great.
And I'm going to commend them on the hairstyles too, because we haven't looked at these yet, but there's a few gangster movies that AIP produced in the late 60s, early 70s, where these characters in the 1930s have kind of bushy hairdos that would be very out of place and probably get them laughed out of the bank they were trying to rob had they shown up with that hairstyle.
He's some kind of hippie from the future. I love Raquel's crimped Marcel waves. I think she looked really good. And I think there aren't too many other notable hairstyles in the movie, but Kate looked good too. She obviously was the plainer Jane to Raquel's beautiful Queenie. I thought she was pretty, but they made her a little dowdier just to compare to Raquel Welch, as if anyone could. What about the acting?
I don't think there's any bad acting here. I think that James Coco does a good job, despite what the critics thought. I thought that he was pretty well cast as the Fatty Arbuckle replacement.
I thought he was really good too, and I found out this is his only leading role. He had never been the leading man before. I think he did a great job. When he did his little Oscar speech on the balcony, talking about being a self-made man and then thinking about Queenie, it was a little hammy, but I could see that transition happening in him. The anger, the sadness, the nostalgia washing over his face. I thought he did a really good job.
It may have been hammy, but he did a better rendition of it than I did.
Oh, yeah. No offense. And I loved David Dukes as Jimmy. In the original cut, we didn't get to see as much of his acting chops in the AIP cut because they cut out some really important scenes. But I liked him a lot in this movie. What about Raquel? She kind of gets dogged as being just a pretty face in some of these reviews and in general.
No, I think Raquel did a respectable job too. This isn't something she's going to be remembered for, obviously, because The Wild Party isn't a very good film. She's always going to be the girl in the fur bikini. But The Wild Party seems to be a good place to showcase her chops of what she can actually do.
Yeah, you could see a much better range.
Particularly in the longer cut, which we didn't really discuss.
No, unfortunately we couldn't. But if you do watch that, and that's probably the one you will find, you'll see what we're talking about. She has to make Jolly happy. She has to make herself happy. These two goals are contradictory, and it's not possible to do both. So we do see her being torn between what she wants and what her meal ticket wants.
And she has to sing Singapore Sally and do that soft shoe.
And she did a pretty good job singing. It's not a great song, and it goes on way too long, but she did an all right job.
Well, she did do the extended dance solo in the middle of it to kind of pad it out.
It took up a lot of screen time. I think the song itself is fine, but we came back to it twice after it began. The music kind of got on my nerves in this movie. I don't know about you.
Well, there's no really great songs here to speak of. I couldn't even find a listing of what the songs were. When I've said the titles, I'm just guessing based upon what was repeated the most often.
I read a review that said they couldn't believe that no soundtrack was released for this movie. But
well,
maybe,
who would have bought that?
Maybe, I don't think it would have done very good.
Not in 1975.
No. That's when we were interested in the 50s.
No, Happy Days was the number one show.
Right. But the movie The Sting brought us the song The Entertainer. I had to play that in band class in elementary school. And so it maybe would have done good, but I don't think the songs would have carried them there. They're kind of repetitive. They all basically sound the same. They're just different lyrics. And they're all way too upbeat for this movie, which is a tragedy.
Ain't nothing bad about feeling good.
That might have been the only scene-appropriate song.
The Herbert Hoover drag.
Well, nobody knows who Herbert Hoover is anymore. The ending to this cut was so abrupt, too. All we do is see him in the hospital writing the words, "The Wild Party," on folded up paper, and immediately it's over.
Right. We don't even have him reciting the poem that we have at the open of the longer cut.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't include at least part of that. Maybe the end of the poem, which we probably never heard at all. But then again, this movie is only partially based on that.
Yeah, maybe the ending. I've read the poem. Maybe the ending didn't match the story at all, so that wouldn't have worked.
I wasn't mad at the orgy scenes, but they just went on a little long.
I was kind of relieved to see the orgy scenes because this party didn't seem too wild up until that point.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to mention. This is one of the least wild parties. I mean, that's the title. This party should have been slamming with loud music and tons of dancing and drugs and drinking. And it was just people going off into little groups and having sex or talking or fighting or whatever. There was hardly any party unity.
I'm sure there was a much more happening party at the pick fair.
We should have gone there instead.
That would have been the better movie.
Well, we'll write that one. Well, now that we've summed up our feelings about this party, let's do that again, but with a rating this time. A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, as we mentioned, the original longer cut tested poorly, so AIP took it upon themselves to re-edit it. And I can understand why it tested poorly, because it's just not really a good movie. If I was rating it on a 5-point scale, the longer cut would probably get 2 stars, and then I'd round it up to an I. But the shorter version isn't even as good as the longer cut, so I would have to give that one a P. Which I hate to do because as much as I dislike The Wild Party, I really enjoyed talking about this one. And it doesn't make me angry like some of the films that I've previously designated a P rating to. But I'm going to have to stand by that. And for me, The Wild Party is a P.
Well, I agree with you that the longer cut is an improvement over the shorter cut. But when I was deciding what rating to give this, I was thinking more of the things that I did like about the movie. The acting, the style, the story, such as it was, at least the parts that worked for me. And I decided that overall, I was going to give it an I for intermediate because it had enough good to outweigh the bad. The bad parts of it were it was boring. The AIP cut was nonsensical. A lot of scenes were left out that should have been left in. But I did like James Coco's performance. I did like being in the 1929 milieu. I thought it was an interesting idea. This silent movie actor is trying to restart his career with this very important party. Gone terribly wrong. I wish that the ending would have been more fleshed out, what happens after. But overall, I didn't hate it either. And usually if I don't hate a movie, I don't give it a P. And that's the same for this movie. I'm giving it an I.
Well, you're right. The elements are all there, so this should have and could have been a better film than it ended up being. It's got a good aesthetic. I like the idea of it taking place during the advent of talkies and that being an element. The film Singing in the Rain is all about that era, and I love that one. But I'm not going to change my rating because despite all that, this movie just isn't what it should be. So I'm sticking with the poor rating.
I don't blame you. It was a toss-up for me. I changed my mind yesterday on what I was going to give it after we watched it the second time. It just had something in it that I did like, and movies that have nothing in it I give a P2. Like One Summer Love, that just annoyed the heck out of me. But this one didn't do that. Well, that's it for The Wild Party. You don't got to go home, but you can't stay here. For the American International Podcast, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.